Hey guys, it's time to Nefis and chill, and in this video I want to briefly talk about healers and healing in The Elder Scrolls Online. No doubt some of you are indignant or puzzled in regards to the title of the video, but we'll be going over the rather complicated and nuanced circumstances that I still see affect a lot of you who main healing. Now, I haven't healed since the Scalebreaker patch, but I can definitely tell you that the various reasons and factors as to why a lot of groups don't really like bringing healers to 4-man content or even some 12-man content nowadays have been around for quite a while, and this has only been exacerbated over time as ESO continues to grow. To start off, we need to define healing and what it means within the context of ESO, particularly for those of you who've never played it, or are just starting to play it, or have never played an MMO before. Professor Stout Anima from ESO University had this to say about healing in her written guide on Outcast website, which I highly recommend you guys read. Healing is the act of using your abilities to restore the health of your party members, yourself included, to help them survive through taking a combination of avoidable and unavoidable damage. However, just like in my beginner's tanking guide, this definition, as noted by Stout Anima, is for the very rudimentary and basic definition of the role or act, basically the bare minimum. I would add to the definition of healing, just like with tanking, that it becomes more about supporting the group in other ways, not limited to just healing, such as providing the necessary buffs and debuffs that your group may require to succeed. Well, what kind of buffs and debuffs are we talking about here? And just as I say in quite a few videos, including my Tanking 101 video, damage is king. And so, we have the primary root issue that we need to review when it comes to healing, and that is the fact that damage is king in ESO. What do I mean by this? It is undeniable that the more damage a group has, the easier it becomes for the group. Gone are the days when most decently organized groups even think about Lunar Phase of Rakat Hard Mode and Mob Lorcage. Gone are the days when the old DLC dungeons were challenging, because you don't get to see most of the mechanics anymore. Even in the new DLC dungeons, experienced players or a group that doesn't even have the greatest DPS in the world don't get to see a lot of mechanics. And even for endgame groups, if you watch my videos or other endgame raiders, you'll notice that even 12-man groups usually just has only one healer. Perhaps the biggest personal example of damage is king for me is when I did Veteran Castle Thorn with 3 other endgame players. Didn't see more than one mechanic on any of the boss fights, apart from the last boss hard mode, that I did the next day on Bethesda's livestream in a group with less DPS, whereas I saw a lot more mechanics, and the difference between the two groups was quite staggering in terms of difficulty from the content, because once the mechanics were in full effect. But how do healers fit into this? It's no secret that in recent years, even casual groups have started to change the traditional group composition of 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS into 1 tank and 3 DPS, whether it's for veteran dungeons, DLC dungeons, pledges, or even the arenas. For random normals, we also have fake tanks, fake healers, and regardless of your views on those matters, we can safely say that 4 DPS running through a random normal is quite faster than the traditional setup of a dungeon group. Obviously, we have to be cautious here with my wording, because I don't mean every group in the world will or can do 3 DPS and 1 tank for all content, or 4 DPS for Dragonstar Arena. I am well aware that these are somewhat extreme outliers in the ESO community, and even for those, I sometimes recommend, depending on the group's goals, like Unchained and Black Rose Prison, to bring a healer just to make the attainment of the goal easier. However, judging from the posts on ESO's subreddit, the various Discord communities I lurk in, and of course the official ESO forums, along with a large number of viewers on both YouTube and Twitch asking me why groups want you to do more damage as a healer, and even some of me going so far as to say that you simply don't heal anymore, this has nonetheless become a noticeable issue. You may also be wondering to yourself, well wait, if a group can't do much DPS and experience more mechanics, wouldn't it make sense that you'd want more healing to counteract those mechanics? Well, no, not exactly. If a group can't do a certain amount of DPS, there's nothing stopping the person in the role of a healer to simply switch to DPS or a more damage-oriented setup, and thus make it easier on the rest of the group, so they don't experience the mechanics in the first place. And here we now enter very, very complicated territory, where we're not only looking at healing itself in a vacuum, but but we must also look at healing within the context of group play, the nature of said game mechanics, the game's philosophy of play however you want, and of course the content itself. I won't be going too much into depth here, and if you guys have any thoughts on this entire matter or opinions, definitely let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. In regards to group play, or the aspect of group play, let's compare a 3 DPS and 1 tank group to a 2 DPS, 1 healer, 1 tank group. Obviously, with 3 DPS, you can get through content faster. Some would argue that it's more high risk for faster reward, but there really isn't. Most players typically go this route for the sake of time. This, however, puts a bit more stress on the tanks, but usually in groups like these, the tanks are used to it and are typically experienced with the content, even slotting gear that is usually meant for healers to wear, such as Spell Power Cure, to provide major courage easily through things such as Blood Altar. On the level of the game's philosophy of play however you want, because that is a major thing about ESO, play however you want, a tank could also slot the necessary buffs and debuffs or even heals that a healer could typically bring. Let's also not forget that the DPS themselves can also heal themselves, negating further need for a healer. As for the game mechanics, well, a sheer majority of the problems that face healers is that a lot of mechanics are not healable, or the damage of the mechanics is laughable. In some ways, the content developers have sometimes seemed to have erroneously mistaken that the more damage a mechanic does, the more need there could be for a healer, but usually a lot of the incoming damage and a lot of content in ESO can either be mitigated or completely avoided with either more DPS, some awareness, or roll dodging on part of either the DPS or the tank. On the level of the content itself, well, a lot of the content is quite outdated relative to the massive power group in ESO. I mean, for a lot of groups, I don't think anyone really goes, hey, we should bring a healer to Selene's Web. So as you guys can probably tell by now, there's no real easy solution to this from our end or the developer's end, because we've sort of reached this point where I personally believe a lot of it stems from the content itself in conjunction with a growth in overall player skill and power creep. I think perhaps Stone Garden and Moongrave Fane are the most exemplar models to follow in one aspect. Perhaps two of the very few dungeons where I would always take a healer myself due to the nature of the mechanics and their damage. For example, the ads on Stone Garden hard mode can do serious debuffs on the tank. The damage over time effect of the boss also ramps up the more health a tank stacks. Little things like these definitely do, from my personal experience, encourage groups to bring a healer for sure, but I don't see this content angle always working, because again, let's think about this on the level of content, because lately the developers want the DLCs to be more accessible. If we look at things like Kain's Aegis, Ice Reach, Unhallowed Grave, the various nerfs to previous DLC dungeons and trials such as Bloodred Forge, White Gold Tower, Halls of Fabrication. This is good. You want to make content accessible, but again, you don't have to be the best players to circumvent the mechanics or difficulties of the fights with moderate DPS or more DPS. Thus, we're kind of back to square one on this, like who's going to bring a healer? But yeah, that's all I want to kind of talk about right now about the healers and the state of healing in ESO. Not a lot of content creators really mention this or bring it up too often. And I want to also explain this to the newer players coming over to ESO, why healers aren't really wanted by a lot of groups once you get more towards endgame. If you guys ever want to learn more about healing, definitely join the ESO University Discord, and also check out the new Healers Haven Discord, which now has over 2,000 other healers who are willing to help you or other players of all levels of experience if you guys wish to get into healing for all PvE content, including trials and dungeons. The Discord links will be down in the video description below. Thanks for watching. Big thanks to the ESO University patrons for keeping our website alive and supporting our Discord partner community. Have a good day, guys.